fun fact, if you were diagnosed with ADHD in the 80s, which is shortly after it became an official diagnosis, there's a good chance you're in perimenopause or menopause. And so my guest today is Jenny from the community, and this is a story session about her experience journey going from a kid who was diagnosed with ADHD in 1984 through perimenopause, and she's still in the thick of it, and how it has influenced her experience, symptoms like brain fog, and also how it has impacted her ability to implement intuitive eating and gentle nutrition, and some of the strategies that she has found helpful. So thanks to Jenny for sharing her story. And I'd love to hear from you, whether that's on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts, if ADHD is something that you're struggling with as you enter this new season of midlife. Hi, Jenny. Welcome to the Midlife Feast.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for having me.
So I realized the other day, and I told you this just before we hit record, that the first generation of kids diagnosed with ADHD, so I think the diagnosis officially came about in the early 80s, are now well into perimenopause or menopause. And as we're about to talk about, you were one of those kids. You were diagnosed in 1984.
I was in sixth grade. It was 1984. I was 11 years old. And I went to a private Catholic school. So the class sizes were really small, 20, 25 kids. So a lot of tension on the kids. It's not like I just faded into the background. And
Right.
for the past, 5 years before that, my report cards would say, is a pleasure to teach, love having her in class, is disruptive, can't sit still. And it was a common theme every year. Like they loved me, but I couldn't sit still, and I would get up and I didn't even realize I was getting up. I would be across the room talking to a friend and not even realize that was happening. And my sixth grade teacher, who still lives in my town, bless her heart, I see her at the farmer's market sometimes.
I love that.
She went to my parents and said, I think that Jenny has this thing. And back then it was called ADD. It wasn't even
Yeah.
ADHD back then. And I had to go to someplace and look at ink blots and do tests and do all the things. And then they were like, yeah, she has it. And then I was on Ritalin for a few years, probably 3 years. And then we decided to take me off that because it was still pretty new and we weren't sure of like the repercussions or any long-term effects. Or it's kind of funny because I'm really short. I'm only 5'2", and we found out later that it could stunt your growth. So
Oh, wow.
I still will never know because my parents are fairly short, but I have a brother who's 6'4". So who knows,
Oh,
maybe I could have been 5'5", who knows? And there was no talk back then about like, taking a summer break or taking a weekend break. It was just like, you're on Ritalin and you're just on. And so then, then I stopped taking the medication. I've always struggled in school, and paying attention and things like that. And I am the combined type, so I do have the inattentive and hyperactive type. Fast forward a bunch of years to about 2010, I want to say, 2012. And I got in a new job and I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't focus. I had a micromanager for a boss. And so I went and got retested as an adult because I thought maybe it went away. No, I don't know. But I was like, there's something not right. So
yeah.
I went to see some professionals and they retested me. And the doctor's comment was, have you been gainfully employed your whole life? I'm like, yes, I have. And I also went to college for 14 years to get 2 degrees. So, if nothing else, I'm persistent. And, but it's just, and it's, working with, what I have and, you know, trying to find what works and coping mechanisms and aids and things like that. Like, it's so much in the media now, like late diagnosis ADHD, especially in
Mhm.
women, stuff like that. And I was like, girl, I've been doing that for 30 years, like, But it's,
Well, and this is what I find so fascinating because I don't know of I don't know of any girls who were diagnosed kind of in my peer group. I think we're about the same age. I'm 47 and change.
yeah, I'm
Um,
41. I'm 41. I wish I'm 51.
so yeah, we're in the same group, but like I knew some boys who were diagnosed in the 80s, but I didn't really know of any girls that were diagnosed, until late high school. So I had a later diagnosis at 19, which is still early comparatively. But again, like if any of my teachers are listening to this podcast, all of them had written at some point, Jennifer is very smart, but she talks too much. She can't sit still. Like, and this constant thing, right? And yeah, and we learn to cope. And the theme or the message, the narrative at the time was that this is something that you outgrow.
Hmm.
The it was always framed as like a problem for school, but once you get older, you'll outgrow it. So what I hear from so many people who are now in perimenopause and menopause is my ADHD came back, or I think I have ADHD, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Challenges around adult diagnosis are an entirely different conversation, but I think that what a lot of people don't realize is that it never went away. If you were diagnosed with it, if you had it, or even if you weren't diagnosed with it and it was there, it did not go away. You learned to cope. You certainly would have built up tools and skills, to allow you to function. And then perimenopause enters the chat. And all of a sudden, the wheels fall off for so many people because now we have the brain fog. We're not sleeping. Everything feels like it's, flipped on its head. And perimenopause is not making that, or ADHD is not making that any easier. So I'd love to hear your experience of kind of when perimenopause landed, how did that happen?
I think it was a slow roll, and I think until I started learning more about the correlation, I honestly just thought it was like age. Like, oh, I'm just more forgetful because I'm getting older,
Mm-hmm.
And a few months ago at work, I left my car running all day.
Oh my
Like, went
gosh.
out at 5 o'clock that night, and I was walking up to my car talking to my husband, and I was like, well, that's weird. It says like it connected to my car,
Oh my gosh.
and it was running all day.
Wow.
Some other things that have happened as of late. I took a shower, came out, dried my hair, walked into the kitchen, and I was like, my hair feels really weird. I was like, oh, I never put shampoo in it. Like, I wet it. I got out of the shower thinking I had washed it, dried it, and I was like, it feels weird. Oh. So, like,
That's hilarious.
yeah,
I've gotten out of the shower without rinsing the conditioner off because my
yeah.
brain is like on to the next step already. By the time I
Hmm.
get to the conditioner, I'm like, okay, and the number of times I've taken the towel off and I've been like, oh, I forgot to rinse out the conditioner.
Yeah, that was the first time that happened. I not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, took the wrong meds. I have a pill box for my meds, and I took my nighttime med, which makes me drowsy. I took that at noon instead of 9 o'clock, and had a half day of work left. And it seems for me the brain fog is bad. I
Mhm.
mean, like real bad. I got another new job about 2 years ago, and I do the same work, but it's in a totally different industry. So there's been a huge learning curve. And at 49 with ADHD in perimenopause and trying to learn a new job has been significantly challenging. And I have a
Yeah.
great team at work. I'm not a manager, but I have a team of people that I work with. And, we joke around, and, I forget things and they laugh because I forget things. And I said to my husband one day, I was like, no one at work knows I have ADHD. He's like, okay. He's like, you mean you haven't told them? You haven't confirmed what is clearly obvious. I was like, yes. So it's, like we have a meeting in the morning and everybody's on Teams, and I have to write a note just like who went. Because we have 9 people, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I called on that person because I run the meeting.
Yeah.
And that would have never happened, short of the last year or two,
Yeah.
and that, so it's that kind of stuff. I will say, um, one thing that has been excellent though is because it's been in the media so much is a lot of the shame has been taken away from me because it's like, that's not just me. I'm not just dumb or forgetful or disorganized. This is how this is. And so
Yeah.
that's been really helpful.
It
Um,
is important. I mean, just like we're talking about perimenopause more, I think the fact that we're talking about ADHD more really opens up the door for understanding, compassion, and also just to not feel like there's something wrong with us when
right,
we have those moments of a perfect storm. And just to kind of back up and talk about the brain fog, because without ADHD, brain fog in and of itself is not nothing. And, we know from research that it's a learning problem. It's not a brain problem. So your brain is rewiring, remodeling, learning to do things in a new way in this new hormonal soup. Things like executive functioning, verbal recall, task prioritization, all of that takes a hit just because of perimenopause. And all of those things are not exactly our strong suits to begin with. And, I certainly know that when I was in the worst of perimenopause, which for me was around late perimenopause, I honestly had packs of sticky notes in every pocket, car, desk, because if I didn't write myself a note for everything, it made me think of it when you were talking about your list of names, it honestly just wasn't going to be remembered. Like I just needed it needed to be written down and it needed to be visible because my brain could not compute that. Now, thankfully for me, postmenopausal, it's been a huge recovery, I guess you could call it. Like I feel like I'm just back to like my normal ADHD now. But it definitely is not, it's not a good time. It is not good times to
well,
have those two things happening.
and I will say, I should have bought stock and Post-its when I was like 12 because, Post-its are, invaluable. But then we have the invention of the smartphone
Yeah.
and then the smart watch.
Mhm.
I have an Apple Watch, and all of those. I mean, like if my watch broke, I would have to immediately go to Apple and get a new one because that's how much I
Mhm.
rely on it. With
Yeah.
calendar reminders, with just regular reminders, and I have so many reminders on my phone. And the other day at work, when I was leaving, my boss saw my phone and I had a post it on my phone with, and he goes, Jen, you know that thing you're holding can remind you of stuff. And I said, I get so many reminders when it's really important. I need that on top of it. And he was like, oh, thank you, Mr. 35-year-old boss that doesn't understand anything that I'm going through right now. And he wasn't really picking on me. He was picking on me, but like
Yeah.
not being mean. And I was like, yeah, yeah, and the executive function, and we've been talking about this in the Midlife Feast membership a little bit, is like meal planning, like
Yes.
is ridiculous. Like, I mean, I said to myself the other day, I think I'm a very good baker and cook, but it's also amazing I can produce anything because, and that is getting worse as well. I'll be halfway through a recipe and like, oh crap, I needed this. And I know the steps in my head, like step one, Jenny, you have brain fog, you have ADHD, you're in perimenopause. You need to read the entire recipe before you start. Nope. Like I know logically that's what I need to do, and I still don't do it. And then I get halfway through and like, oh, I don't have that. Oh, with the soft butter. Oh, with the frozen butter. And it's like, nope, I got cold butter. What can I do with that? And like,
I have a beef with recipes that don't lead with the state
right.
of butter that you need. Like I want them to be called like soft butter cookies or hard butter cookies because I every time a recipe calls for butter in baking, I have not done the right thing either. So I totally relate to that. But I
And
do
I
want to talk about food because the gentle nutrition principle that we talk about in intuitive eating requires both the ability to listen and the ability to respond. And ADHDers both love and hate rules and structure. And there's just a lot of, overlap, but not intuitive overlap. Like I think sometimes because people who have ADHD tend to be a little bit more spontaneous, I think sometimes it's easier to lean into satisfaction or like, what do I want? What do I feel like? Like that part comes a little bit easier. But sometimes it's too easy and we want to bring in some structure, and so it can be complicated. So I'd love if you can just tell us a little bit about how you feel like all of that has intersected with nutrition.
Oh, that is tough. First, honestly, really before joining your group and like learning more about attunement, like my interoceptive awareness, because I have ADHD, which is, I know that you know, but I'll just say it, like paying attention to our own body signals and things
Yeah.
like that. That's a struggle. And I didn't realize how bad of a struggle it was until I started intuitive eating, tried to get deeper into it, tried to check in with myself with the fullness and hunger cues. And I'm like, I heard, I'm reading, actually listening to a book right now, and it's about ADHD, and they said there's a chapter on time, and it's the one more thing phase. I got to
Mm.
do one more thing. I got to do one more thing, and I do that, and then all of a sudden it's 20 minutes, and now I'm past. Oh, I'm hungry. I should get something to eat. That like I need to shove in my face whatever is the first thing I can grab in the kitchen, or else I will kill somebody. Like and
Yeah.
it, like 0 to 100 in 10 minutes. And I think it's because, well, I'm pretty sure it's because the, like, I'm sure it's building up and I don't realize it until it's that bad,
Yeah.
And so, like, the hunger and food scales, it's like, yeah, that's great. And that's something to strive for, but that doesn't work for me a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying to pay attention so I'm, like, can realize it, quicker than the ravenous section or whatever the, 10 is or whatever. But that's a very hard thing. That's a very hard thing. The same with fullness. Um, and I know there's a lot of talk, in our group and in social media, and there's so much intuitive eating space and non-diet and everything out there is like, just sit at the table with no distractions and eat. And I'm like, lovely. Also, gun to the head because that's about how close I can do that. That's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
impossible.
And I mean, that's like next level mindful eating.
Right.
Even, and I think any living person, regardless of their ADD, ADHD status, has a hard time doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so what I love about intuitive eating is that under the umbrella of gentle nutrition, we can talk about practical eating. And
Right.
so practical eating, and we can loop that into, doing something that your future self will thank you for, this behavior activation of cognitive behavior therapy combined with practical eating allows us to say, I know I'm going to need to eat every few hours. How can I lower the bar and have adequate options available to me that I can reach for quickly, that I don't have to think and plan and, spend a lot of resources on? And I think that's a skill that I can apply to anybody, but I think it's an especially useful skill if you're in the throes of perimenopause and ADD for sure.
And before I found intuitive eating, I'm self-diagnosed orthorexic. I was definitely counting, measuring,
Yeah.
planning, everything, and to be honest, that was easier.
Hmm.
That was easier because it was structure. I think
Yeah.
I shared in a call not too long ago that it was like, oh my God, I can eat all the things. Now I'm in paralysis because I can eat all the things.
Hmm.
Because that's another really tough thing of ADHD is decision making,
Hmm.
and it
Yeah.
applies to food 100%. Like, okay, I'd really love to have a chicken, grill some chicken and have a salad and whatever. But now I've structured my day that I have 12 minutes to eat, and what can I get, like, because it's the planning again. It's if I don't, like, I don't plan well, and if I had a personal chef, intuitive eating would be super easy because they would just I would just go
Yeah.
on my phone and say, "This is what I would like you to serve me every day for lunch," and I would eat it, and it would be great. But it's the planning and the execution that's the problem, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's just me. I'm home alone. I work from home. I'm by myself. It's just my dog and I. And it's not like I'm having to worry about kids or, get them fed or whatever. It's just me. And it's a lot of days are tough. And um, I'm learning more with the gentle nutrition concept of like at least have a loose plan,
Yeah.
or a couple loose plans. I put that recipe in our chat yesterday because it's like it was canned white beans and tuna and lemon and arugula, and pretty much
So
I
good.
always can have that, and that's super easy to make and takes 5 minutes, and I can have it for a couple meals, but that's the stuff
Yep.
that I need if it's not a leftover, you know. So
And I think one of the underestimated relationships between food and ADHD is the stimulation that eating provides.
right, right,
And so I don't know, it's not a hack, but one of the things that I really leaned into a few years ago was recognizing that when I'm working on something, when I'm concentrating, when I'm reading, when I'm learning, I really enjoy having and find it really helpful to have something to snack on, something crunchy. And so now if I have a big project or something that I really need to sit down for, I make myself like a charcuterie board of different sizes, textures, tastes. So I'll have grapes and tomatoes and nuts and chocolate covered almonds and other sweet, like just so that I can really lean into what is satisfying and also what is going to give me that stimulation. And I
mm-hmm,
know a lot of people kind of pathologize that relationship, but I think that's where intuitive eating, at least for me, has kind of opened it up to me and be like, actually, this can be really helpful. It's not a weakness that
right,
my brain gets stimulated by eating, but I can also put some planning into it so that I'm not just reaching into the bag of chips all the time while I'm reading, and then the bag of chips is gone and I'm not satisfied because it wasn't the only thing that I wanted, right? Have you noticed anything like that, that like when you're trying to focus that you crave things?
not when I'm trying to focus, but when I'm stressed out, I can tell.
Mm.
Like, because I work from home, the pantry's right behind me in the kitchen. And I have found myself on more than one occasion before, and it was probably a lot of occasions before I realized I was doing it, that I would go and get candy a lot, like chocolate
Mhm.
chips or something. And like when I was in a meeting that was getting a little heightened, or I was listening and there was like any kind of friction, and I was like, oh, and then I would just have to go get food. And yeah, and I'm the newest thing that I'm doing right now is I'm trying to focus more on protein because I
Mhm.
love carbs, and I think that that's not that there's anything wrong with carbs, but I think I was inadvertently focusing on carbs because they're quick and easy. And sure,
Yep.
I can make a peanut butter sandwich in 4 minutes, and but I will say that just even focusing on having more protein has made me feel like I have a little bit of guardrail, and not like a diet, but like it's something. It's
Yeah.
something that, like, at the heart of something, that I have something to kind of like anchor me. Like, okay, I want to have protein, and what else can I have? Instead of I'm going to have a box of macaroni and cheese and I'm going to be hungry in an hour because that's all I have, you know? So,
And focusing on how you feel is such a great starting point. Like the food I'm eating is fine, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not filling me up. It's
hmm,
not satisfying. What can I add to it? And I mean, that is gentle nutrition and intuitive eating in a nutshell, is not following food rules and really using how you're feeling in your body to guide what you do on your plate without any like good, bad thinking. And,
right.
noticing that, hey, adding in this protein is helpful. And you're using that framework still of, okay, I'm going to start with protein, but I'm not ending there. I'm not making it the only thing that I'm eating, is a great example of building a balanced plate, right?
I'm not having chicken breast for a snack in my purse. When you said that the other day,
I'm
oh my
telling you, that is
gosh.
so. Just for anyone listening, we had a call, and when I was talking about how often, people are trying to eat more protein because they hear it's good for them. But I have had people, and I know there are listeners listening, who literally pack cooked chicken breasts for their snacks because that's how they're meeting their protein goal. And it is kind of funny to think about because I don't think I could do that. But it also speaks to the protein mania that's out there, that is where the bar is set. That if you're not snacking on a chicken breast in between meals, that you can't possibly meet your protein needs, which is definitely not the case. You totally can. Not to shame any chicken lovers out there, because eat all the chicken you want.
Yeah.
But if you don't love snacking on cooked chicken breast, just know that you do not have to. That's the take home from this. Oh, so is there anything else that you would like people to know or feel like lessons learned from somebody who's been managing ADHD for longer than anyone that I know, and is also navigating perimenopause as an intuitive eater? Any words of wisdom?
Oh boy. I think one of the biggest things is just, well, some of the things, knowledge. Like, I'm a big researcher,
Hmm.
look, you know, try and get more facts, try and get more helpful ideas and tips. And, somebody sent me a like 3 or 4 page article on tips for coping with ADHD,
Mm,
and I pretty much do all of them.
yeah,
I was like, I could have written this article. But especially if you've been newly diagnosed, or even if you aren't diagnosed, if you just assume that you have it or you're feeling like you have it, you've hit a hot spot in our media cycle right now, because there's a lot of information out there. There really is a
yeah.
lot of information out there.
Too
And
much sometimes, too
yeah, too
much.
much. And, when you find those things that work for you, don't feel bad. I mean, that's the other thing, is like, I'm putting a post-it on, literally a physical post-it on my phone, and I'm not going to feel bad about it because that's what I have to do. That's,
Yeah,
some days that's where my brain's at, and that's just what I have to do.
yeah,
So that, that in, as far as like gentle nutrition and intuitive eating and ADHD and perimenopause is like, like Jen says all the time, lower the bar. I mean, like, if I had the time, the energy, and the executive function, I would eat homemade meals every meal, something different all the time, but that doesn't always happen.
yeah,
And it's okay to eat frozen ravioli, and it's okay to, last night I had a burger and a pickle and a few chips, and that was my dinner, because that's what like, would I have loved to maybe have some sort of other vegetable besides a pickle? Yeah, but that just didn't, that's how yesterday was.
yeah,
Um, and Culver's is not going to kill you. That's okay, because sometimes you just need to eat a burger because you don't have time, or you don't have the you
yeah.
don't have the executive function. And I've just noticed, as I get further into menopause, and it seems like that is more of a struggle for me, um, I am allowing myself to lower the bar, to use tools that I have, and not just fight through it. I think
Yeah.
that's the other thing, like, Um, I'm married, and I talk to my husband, and there's some days that I mean, I've been married, we've been together for 25 years, almost 24 years. And some days I'm like, I got nothing. I have no idea what
Mhm.
to do for dinner. I have no bandwidth to go out and get something. And some days I do, and some days I don't. And that, you know, I think more in this perimenopause stage with ADHD, the tiredness, I'm sure, in just regular perimenopause is hard, but combine that with ADHD, it's a new level of exhaustion that I've never felt. And,
Yeah.
still some days are great. Like, I can, go on about my day and get things done. And some days I'm like, I can't. I'm sitting watching murder shows for 5 hours because I can't do anything. On a
Yeah.
weekend, of course, because I work full time. But so I think, I think that those are, typically the things, and you know, yeah, and reach out and talk to other people. I have a friend who, about 2 years ago now, went and got her own diagnosis just from listening to me talk.
Yeah.
And then another one of her friends went and got a diagnosis for hearing her talk about it. Um, so I think too, use all the resources that are out there for you. If you want to get a
Yeah.
diagnosis, just go out and get that. I mean, I can't take stimulant medication because
Hmm.
I also have anxiety, so I don't get any help in that area. I know that a lot of people can, and it's super
Hmm.
helpful, and that's great. I'm just not one of those people. Um, but, you know, oh,
Yeah.
I can touch on something else. You know what else is really good for this? For the brain fog at this time of life? Movement.
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
another huge thing.
Yeah.
So, I've been doing yoga for about 14 years, but before the pandemic, I was going to about 5 classes a week. And then pandemic hit. I'm like, I'm not going to do yoga with a mask on. So I had to find another way. And a few friends and I have a group chat going since December of 2020, and we do yoga every day.
Amazing.
And we follow an at-home program and get on our mats and check in with each other, and we have accountability, and it's been really great. And every once in a while, I'll miss it in the morning, like if I'm not feeling well or something comes
Hmm.
up, and I'll do it later in the day, but I can tell that I didn't do it that morning before work.
Hmm.
So that has been a game changer for me. And I hike with my dog, and I recently started a strength program. Um, and all of those things, that would be a good takeaway too. That all of
Yeah.
that, and it's not in the vein of I want to lose weight or I want to look a certain way. That is definitely has transformed in my life to how I want to feel.
Yeah. And that is
Yeah.
joyful movement, right? Joyful movement, that principle of intuitive eating isn't just about having fun while you're doing it. It's about adding joy to your life, even outside of the movement. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all know, probably most people know that movement is health promoting, but it is also a tool if you have a brain that maybe needs a little bit of support. Whether it's the endorphins, whether it's the blood flow, whether it's the activity itself, who knows? But it definitely is a great tool to have in your toolbox.
And I've been working at home full time mostly. Like I started in the pandemic working a little bit from home, and probably 95% of the time I'm able to walk my dog at lunch, and that totally resets my whole day. Like
Yeah.
now I can go for the afternoon, like I need to do it before work. And if, best case scenario, I get to do it halfway through the day. And that has been a really big game changer. Not that the brain fog goes away, but it gets pushed back a little bit with
Yeah.
with some
It just
movement.
clears the
And
cobwebs, right?
yeah, yeah. And,
And
and I know a lot of people have indoor exercise equipment and stuff, but for me, getting outside in nature and things like that is also another bonus. So
for sure. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. You've been so open in the community that I was glad that I reached out and asked if you would come on the podcast. And as I always ask my guests, what do you think is the missing ingredient in midlife?
So I had a little heads up. You told me this yesterday. Think about it. So, my what I would say the missing thing in midlife is grace,
Love it. Can't go wrong with that. We
and
do need a
you
lot
know,
more.
yeah, grace for myself, but also grace for everybody else.
Yeah.
Like my yoga teacher has a quote that says, "Everything is as it should be." And it's like allowing me the same grace that I will allow other people, and vice versa. And I think that this midlife has really taught me with the struggles and the exhaustion and the brain fog and the, trying to intuitively eat and not be on a diet and all of that stuff is just like every day is not going to be perfect, and you just have to have grace.
Yeah.
So
Well said, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining me today.
you're welcome.